Hello, this is William, here to explain and define academic language, especially as it pertains to history and social studies. Now, the first definition of academic language is language for academic purposes, which seems a bit circular. So to explore it more, I turned to Jeff Zwiers, the author of the textbook we've been using in class, and numerous other writings on education. His 2004 article on education leadership, I thought, had some really good information on defining what academic language is. First, he has a couple metaphors. He says, academic language is a linguistic glue that holds the task, text, and tests, say that 5 times really fast, of school together. So by this he means, in school we are confronting texts, we are learning things from different texts, and we are kind of recreating them and learning them, processing them in our students' brains. And academic language is like the means of which we do that. So complex subjects require complex language. The other metaphor Zwiers uses is an ocean that teachers live in. So teachers, and most of the 3SB students, I would argue, have accumulated social, cultural knowledge and vocabulary that exists on a subconscious level. They don't even are aware of all the things they are doing to comprehend and produce their texts. And Zwiers is arguing that by becoming more consciously aware of academic language aspects, they could explicitly model it for their students and teach it better. And he also argues that academic language is like a third language, full of new words and strategies and structures. The first language being their native tongue, the second language being social English. This would be a third language. And so one might argue that even for native speakers who aren't raised in an academic environment, academic language is almost like a second language. Zwiers goes on to define a more precise definition that academic language is a set of words and phrases that 1 describes content area knowledge and procedures, 2 expresses complex thinking processes, 3 create cohesion and clarity in written and oral discourse. So in examining what language is, especially for social studies, the category 1 would seem to be most important, although obviously the other 2 categories are important as well. So now that we've come up with some definitions and concepts of what academic language is, trying to relate it to teaching history and social studies, and for this I'm focusing on the EdTPA resources you've included. So academic language being the language of the discipline that's used to engage students in learning. The lesson plans kind of force us to make sure that we include in our lesson plans ways that we define specific academic language goals to engage with in students. And these goals and demands are in 4 areas: function, vocabulary, discourse, and syntax. So I'll be referring to the EdTPA resources. I also found a chapter of a book, The CEOP Model of Teaching History and Social Studies to English Learners by Deborah Short and others, that I found useful as well. So the first area is function. And this is the purpose for which language is used, and ideally represented in lesson plans by specific action words. And my understanding was it seems to be largely focused on the language production tasks or domains of writing and speaking, although obviously language comprehension is important as well. Examples for history and social studies that would ideally be included in your lesson plan would be explain, describe, compare, sequence. These are all different things that people use language to accomplish. TPA recommends that each lesson segment concentrates on just teaching one specific language function. The second area of academic language is vocabulary. Words, phrases, symbols. There are 3 types of vocabulary. One is words that are created or defined for use mostly within a particular discipline. So like longitude for geography and medieval and history. Those are pretty much words specific to the discipline. In addition, there are words that have a particular meaning within a discipline that is different from everyday English. These are called polysemous words. I just learned that adjective. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. So example will be a legend means it's not a story from long ago. In geography, it means something very specific, the key to a map. A depression doesn't mean mental illness. It means something very specific in the disciplines of economics and history. And so probably recommend that teachers, especially in a class with English learners, would maybe take time to provide a list or specifically teach words to the students before they dive into their lesson plan. And finally, there are words that are part of the general academic vocabulary in multiple disciplines, like analyze, compare, and describe and evaluate. Some people have said that words up here are like the bricks of learning, and the general words like these are like the mortar that holds the bricks together. Discourse. So this is defined as how historians or members of other disciplines talk and write when making and sharing knowledge, and they often have specialized or specific text structures. So examples for history and social studies would be constructing or interpreting arguments or making debates, interpreting primary or secondary sources, essays, either analyzing essays or writing essays, interpreting graphic representations like maps and graphs, analyzing political cartoons. These all could be placed in the discourse in your lesson plan. And finally, syntax, which is the rules governing how words and symbols are organized to convey meaning. So examples for history social studies are specific sentence structures like cause and effect. I would use phrases like as a result or because. Citations, historians are supposed to cite their sources often, so there's particular rules and norms for citing. Visual rules, like in geography, the lines for latitude and longitude. And according to a TBA, we should specifically cover syntax or discourse with each lesson segment, but not necessarily both. All right, so I hope this serves as a brief explanation of academic language as it pertains to history and social studies.